All right, in this video, we will cover topic 3.7. Know the main monetary aggregate, the monetary base, MD, M1, M2, and M3. Okay, so let's have a look. First thing that we must understand is that those monetary aggregates, they are different measures of the amount of money that is in the economy, not necessarily money in circulation, but basically the aggregates means that we look at the combined amount of money. And there are different ways in which we will define those monetary aggregates, especially M1, M2, M3. The monetary base is slightly different. So for now, let's just focus on M1, M2, and M3. There are several ways in which we can measure the amount of money that is in circulation in the economy, something that is known as the money supply, simply because it is not always super clear what should be regarded as money and what should not be regarded as money. Because certain assets are less liquid than others. Of course, assets that are very, very liquid are clearly forms of money. We'll talk about that in a minute. But then there are certain assets that are still relatively liquid, but not as much. So essentially, depending on how strict we are when it comes to the definition of money in terms of how liquid is it, or do we only keep only the most liquid assets, or do we allow certain financial assets that are slightly less liquid to be counted as money? Then we may have monetary aggregates that are more or less narrow. Okay, so essentially, first, we'll leave the monetary base a bit later because it does not include money in circulation. So let's for now focus on M1, 2, and 3, which are measures of the money supply, the quantity of money that is in circulation in the economy. Well, a first way in which we can define the money supply is to adopt a rather strict definition of money. What I mean by strict is that we will only keep or include the financial assets that are the most liquid. Liquidity refers to the ease with which we can convert an asset into cash. If it's quick, cheap, and if you don't, and not costly, cheap, quick, that's about it, and simple, then we say that an asset is very liquid. On the other hand, there are certain assets for which it's either longer or more costly or more complicated to convert them into cash, basically to sell them and get money in return. So those assets are regarded as less liquid. A first way in which we can define money is to include only those financial assets that are very liquid. And we call this M1, which is also known as narrow. M1 is going to include currency. Currency, that's basically banknotes and coins, even though, well, coins are a very small percentage, but banknotes and coins, something that we sometimes also know as cash. And we will also include the sight deposits. So sight deposits, there are several names. Sometimes we call them checkable deposits because you can write checks on those deposits, which means that you can directly use them to buy goods and services. They are also known as demand deposits because you can basically demand these funds anytime you want. You can go to the ATM and you can get the money. And of course, sight deposits are very, very liquid. Well, simply because you can use these deposits whenever you want to buy goods and services. So they are very liquid. So that's, in most countries, that's basically the definition of M1, narrow money. In Switzerland, we also include postal account, but again, it's not particularly important. My point is that even if you forget to include the postal accounts, and there are even other accounts. I even forgot the names. I'll just check in a minute. But again, what really matters is currency and sight deposits, which is really the most liquid form of money. Let me just check the name of those accounts. Like the one that I forgot is the transaction account. Transaction accounts are like savings accounts in the sense that they do pay an interest, but they are more liquid than a typical savings account because you can directly use the funds that are on these accounts to buy goods and services. So basically, they are checkable. You can write a check on this transaction account, or you can perhaps use a debit card that will directly access the funds. So that's why they are very much as liquid as the rest. Postal account. These are bank accounts that are opened at let's say the Swiss postal organization, which offers households the possibility to open some bank accounts. So you see that all of these forms of money are extremely liquid, and that's why they are included in what we call narrow money. Now, if we define money in a bit broader way, if we allow certain assets that are a bit less liquid, but that are still relatively liquid, to be included in the monetary aggregate, in the definition of money, then we can construct M2. So of course, M2 includes M1, but we are also going to include financial assets that are slightly less liquid, and in particular, we can include saving accounts. Saving accounts that are not transaction accounts. But why are savings accounts less liquid? Because usually the money that you have on a savings account is rewarded by an interest rate. So that's the advantage. By depositing money on a savings account, you can get a reward. In Switzerland, it's around 1 to 2% right now. In France, it's around 3%. Of course, it depends on inflation and other factors. But it is a bit less liquid than a sight deposit, because you cannot use the funds, at least not directly, you cannot use the funds that are on your savings account to buy goods and services. For example, if I have a checkbook, I cannot write checks on this account. I cannot draw money from a saving account. Same thing, if I have a debit card or credit card, it cannot use the funds that are deposited on my savings account. So that's why we consider that savings accounts are less liquid. However, they are still regarded as relatively liquid, because for some reason, if I want to use money, the only thing that I have to do is to transfer the funds from my savings account to my, let's say, a checkable account, just basically to convert a savings deposit into a sight deposit. Okay, I just use my app on the phone and I say, okay, I'm going to transfer 20,000 francs from my savings account to my checking account. And then once the transfer has been successful, which can be instantaneous, which can take up 2 days, but that's relatively quick. Usually it's absolutely free. And then you can use the funds to buy goods and services. So that's quite liquid. And if we use at least a definition of money that is even broader, in the sense that we allow financial assets, we include financial assets that are even less liquid, then we can get M3, which of course includes M2, but we can include time deposit. So a time deposit is another form of savings account, but the key difference between what we call here saving account and a time deposit is that a saving account, you can basically get your money anytime you want, right? There is no maturity date after which you will be able to get your money back. Your money is not frozen for, let's say, 2 years, 3 years, about 4 years. You can get it back anytime you want without having any kind of penalty. In the case of a time deposit, usually the way it works is that you any money that you deposit on this type of account is going to be frozen on that account until your account matures. So just to give you an example, when I was at university, I opened a time deposit in France. We call it PEL, Plan Épargne Logement. And the money that is deposited on this account is frozen for 5 years. So basically, if let's say I opened this account on January 1st, 2012, I cannot get my money back before January 1st, 2017. And so why do people do that? Why not just putting the money on a savings account? Well, simply because usually money that you put on a time deposit, they pay a higher rate of interest. There is a reward that is typically more interesting. And of course, the longer you freeze the money on the account, the higher the reward. Okay? And well, you understand why it's less liquid, because if you want the money back, you basically have two options. First, you wait until your account matures, until you are entitled to get your money back at no cost. If you really need the money urgently, if you feel like you can't wait until this account matures, you can do it. You can just give a phone call to your bank and say, I need the money right now. And the bank will tell you, all right, we can do that, no problem. It's likely to be rather quick, but you will face pretty important penalties. And of course, it depends from one bank to the other, from one account to the other. But typically, you lose all of the accumulated interest that this account has generated. Because of course, year after year, this account generates interest. And then once your account matures, boom, you receive all of the interest that have accumulated at once. But if you decide to close the account before it matures or to withdraw some money from the account, well, you lose a lot. So that's why we regard it as less liquid. Not really because you have to wait until the end. Because if you really want the money, you can, but because it would be very costly for you to convert the money into cash before it matures. Right, so if we want to summarize what we've said so far, so we have, let's just call that cash, and I'm not going to include everything, right? I'm just going to say cash and sight deposits. I'm not going to write postal accounts and transaction accounts because the postal account is a kind of sight deposit and the transaction account is very similar. So that's M1. Narrow money. If I add savings accounts, then I get M2. If I add time deposits, then I get M3. So what we have at the core, M1, again, that's what we call narrow. But of course, we only include the most liquid types of assets. M2 and M3, both in fact, M2 and M3, they are commonly referred as broad money. Okay, M2 and M3. Well, anything that is not narrow money or broader issue, okay, but it's not exactly the same. And anything between M1 and M2, or M2 and M3, they are called near monies. Okay, so basically savings accounts and time deposits, they are near money. Or sometimes we call that quasi money, because yeah, okay, It's money, but it's not as liquid as cash or sight deposits, so we call them near money or quasi money. Right, so we are left, so everything here is essentially the money in circulation in the economy, the amount of money in circulation in the economy. There is one last monetary aggregate that you must know, which is the monetary base. So careful, the monetary base does not really measure how much money is in circulation because it includes bank reserves, and bank reserves are not in circulation. The monetary base consists of the amount of currency in circulation in the economy, so cash plus bank reserve. And in fact, instead of writing cash, I should really write currency in circulation. Okay? Because banks, they have cash, but it's not in circulation. So you can fix what I wrote before. Instead of just currency, you should add currency in circulation. So bank reserves. Bank reserves are of two main types. First, you have the physical reserves of mostly banknotes, coins, but mostly banknotes that banks held in their vaults. Of course, when I'm talking about banks, I'm talking about commercial bank, right? Not the central bank. Commercial bank reserves. Banks have a certain amount of cash held physically. It's not in circulation, of course, because it is held by the bank. And there is another type of reserves, which is the money that has been deposited by commercial banks at the central bank. Remember that we often say that the central bank is the bank of commercial banks, which means that every commercial bank has an account at the central bank, and they can deposit their reserves at the central bank, and they often receive a rate of interest, okay, by depositing money at the central bank. Just like if you put money on a savings account, you can receive an interest. Well, it's the same thing for commercial banks. So two types, physical currency held in vaults, but also the reserves deposited by commercial bank at the central bank. And when you combine currency in circulation with this, currency in circulation plus commercial bank reserves, you get the MB, the monetary. Okay. I'm not going to enter into too much detail on why it matters, but essentially, you can remember that the monetary base is essentially or represents the liabilities of the central bank. In accounting, you have assets, what you own, and liabilities, what you owe, and the currency in circulation plus the bank reserves are the liabilities of the central bank. Okay, maybe some numbers just to give you a rough idea of the size of each, but remember that essentially the biggest component, like among currency in circulation, sight deposit, savings account, and time deposit, the biggest one is sight deposit. It's the biggest one. The number two is savings account, and number three are time deposits. Okay, so basically, if you had imagine a pie chart that represents the amount of money in circulation. So we're not talking about reserves for now. We just focus on M1 and M3. Among M3, the biggest component is currency in circulation. The second biggest is sight deposits, and the third largest is savings account. I'll try to get the actual data from Switzerland and draw a pie chart. Give me a second so I try to get it. All right, I've just found the data. So the latest data I have is for November 2023, which is pretty good, and it's measured in millions of francs. So sight deposits, that's 73,000 millions. So that's basically 73 billion francs. Oh, no, sorry, that's currency in circulation. Sorry. Currency in circulation, 33 billion. Side deposits, 536 billion. You don't need to remember these numbers, don't worry, just like the pie chart. Transaction accounts, 16 billion. You see that's not much. Especially compared to side deposits. Really not much, not even, yeah, 3%. So that's N1. You see, we don't even have like postal accounts, so maybe it's included in side deposits. I don't know. Then savings account. We have 306 billion. Two, you can find that on data.snb.ch and time deposits. $199 billion. So overall, just M3 is, so we add everything, right? M3 is 1,132 billion francs. So that's the amount of money in circulation in Switzerland. So you see that roughly, if we had to do a pie chart, let's see if I can give me a sec. Who's this? That's a beautiful drawing from my kids. Amazing, isn't it? So that's the pie chart. So that's M3. So let me just get the data. So currency, let's start with the biggest. So side deposits, 536, which is basically 50%, slightly less. So that's just the side deposit. Then the second biggest savings account, it's a bit less than 25%. So well, it's supposed to be 100. Let's try to make it less. That would be the savings account, a bit less than 25%. Then we have time deposits, 200. So that's probably around here, maybe a bit less. Time deposits. And then we have currency in circulation, maybe a bit more. Then we have currency in circulation. And then we have the transaction account. Okay, that's just to give a rough idea. Okay, almost 50% side deposits, almost 1/4 savings accounts, about 20%, which is going to be time deposits, 15% currency, and 5% or 10% transaction, just to give you a rough idea of the composition of M3 right now in Switzerland. Okay, that's it.